So yeah, March 27th, we'll assume this is our last Zoom meeting of the year because nice weather is obviously arriving upon us. Had a number of things, people asking if we were doing another one to cover. So this is kind of a mishmash of stuff today. What I've planned, besides any question and answers guys come up with, first a bunch of little quick tips and tricks stuff. Then we're going to review some batteries because some of the new guys want to make sure they're up to speed on all the basics before the flying season kicks in full gear. We had a question about basic aerobatics for those who have gotten to the point where they want to start doing some simple things. Question on landings, how to improve landings, and then any questions you guys have. So, Alan's joining us. Good. So first, tips and tricks. The first one, I got a bunch of little quick ones I'm going to show you. So the first tip and trick is when you, whether you buy a plane or build it, it's all made for you, or you're building it yourself. You have a control rod through some kind of clevis going to a control horn. And inevitably, you're going to run into, whether it's a Sullivan type or the plastic kind, and they're threaded on there, you'll have a little bit of play where that pin goes through that clevis because it's really doing this. And they're a little loose. And the trick is, one of the tips I do, so this may not be for the more expensive planes, but for a lot of the basic planes we fly, is you'll turn this clevis just a little bit. So these plastic ones are just friction threaded onto the rod. The Sullivan types, these have a lock nut, but you're going to just turn it a little bit on the rod. So you're going to kind of bias it a little bit. And what that does is, in the hole, it makes it like that. I'm exaggerating, of course, but makes it like that. And now it can't play anymore because the last thing we want is our surfaces to have any slop in them, any kind of flop.
Come on up here.
Okay. So, and it wouldn't be uncommon to buy, plug and play or bind and fly plane and find a little bit of slop in those, but that's how you can get rid of it. Just tweak it a little bit. Okay. So next thing is servo connections. So if you're using any kind of extension on your servos or anything that's using these servo plugs, if you just plug those together, they could do that at some point in your plane. So if you can buy these things, that's one way. So after you put it together, this thing gets snapped on there. Okay. There's also nowadays, if you haven't seen these, there's these ones that come with a little tang sticking out. So when you plug them together, it locks on there. But the real tip and trick today is, and I got this from Mark, who's with us today, dental floss.
Dental floss.
Yes.
I use it all the time.
Now you got to use some of that. You got to use wax dental floss too. The wax stuff works the best. So.
It's easier to tie, anyways.
Yeah. The first knot, the first half of a knot stays in place. So anyway,
and it's cheap.
Yeah, it's cheap and it's very, very light too. So if you do have to use it on some lighter planes, you're not adding weight. So.
Did you guys know that on real aircraft they tie the wiring together with something called lacing, and it's nothing more than waxed linen cord?
Yep.
It's like dental floss, only bigger.
Wiring that moves is not good. So that's another thing to do on our planes where we have, if it's a big enough cavity and the wire can move around a lot, we shouldn't be letting it move around. We should be fastening it so it's not flopping around in the plane. So guys that are just joining us, we're doing some quick tips and tricks first. Then we're gonna get on to batteries and some other stuff. The next tip.
Go back to your clevises again. One more second there. Get your clevis that's loose.
Okay, clevis loose.
So if you have a metal, get a metal one.
Okay.
So this works. So if you have a metal one that goes into a horn that's loose because you drilled it a little bit too big or has play, if you take it, so put your little horn up there with it, or use your plastic one. That one. If you take that, if you wiggle it back and forth and you see there's play, this has worked a number of times for me. If you take medium CA and just put a drop on that,
and the wood,
and then right in the clevis with it all together. Put a drop of medium CA and then kick it, and then as soon as you do that, break it.
Wiggle it.
And now enough of the medium CA gets in that hole to take up that slop, and it stays for a long time. So, that works really well if you don't want to take the model all apart and go to the next size or sleeve it. I've seen a lot of other people do that trick too, and it works really well.
Yep. So this all comes to the issue of the plane is sitting there, the servo's energized, and you grab the surface and you try to move it. And if it's all nice and tight, it may flex a little just because everything flexes. But if you actually feel like clicky, clicky, it's loose, there's actually play, there's a like backlash in the system, then you got to find it, because sometimes it's in the control horn, sometimes it's in the where the horn fits on the servo, and sometimes it's inside the servo itself, and you're not going to change that. So you have to change the servo for that. Okay, so next tip and trick is on glues. We talked about using CA. So a reminder that if you're buying any kind of CA and it's going to be on foam, it has to also say foam safe on it. But another one came up and got shared with me for this meeting, which is we need to be careful. This is good for you, Sean, on fuels around our radio. So one of our flyers had accidentally spilled or got a little bit of exhaust off a glow onto their radio, cleaned it, but over time, what happened was the stick where it was mounted, the plastic broke, and it's a high enough end radio worth sending back to Horizon. It was a Spectrum. So if it's a cheapy radio, you may not want to spend it back and spend the money to repair it. But they looked at it right away. We're able to say, oh, it's got glow fuel on it. The glow fuel attacks the plastic and over time turns it brittle, and the plastic in that area broke and let the stick fall in. So we're talking about foam safe CAs the other day. This is along those lines of we need to be careful about other things like that, like fuel is a solvent and can damage the plastic of our radios. Okay. The other one quick tip is, I do this, you do what you want, but lithium ion batteries, we typically see those in our radios. A lot of our radios nowadays, they used to be all AA's, but then you can buy batteries and now they just come with them. So if you're buying like the new NXs, they come in there automatically. Lithium ion, you can store, it's okay to keep it charged. We're going to talk about polymers here in a minute, lithium polymers, but the lithium ion, you can keep it charged. So what I started doing is every time I come home from flying, I plug my radio in so that whenever I go to use it, I know it's fully charged. And it's okay to leave it just sitting plugged into the charger, because the lithium ion battery itself has its own circuit to not let it overcharge. Okay, so that's just to say it's good practice to keep it fully charged. So last thing was, we talked the other one of the other Zooms about this guy and linkage for servos and how it moves the surface. So the one thing I failed to point out is there's a limited amount of servo resolution, the smallest movement that a servo can do. And if you think of it this way, if you could possibly move your stick in the smallest amount that would create the smallest movement that servo could possibly do, we want to not let that translate into big movements out at the surface. And because your servo is not infinitely smooth, it really does have a finite number of little steps that it goes through, but they're so small that you don't really see it. So the exaggeration I'll give you here is that if I have the horn, if I have the linkage too far out on the servo and too close in on the control surface, even the smallest servo movement translates to large movements on the surface. So again, if you're buying an R for a bind and fly or plug and play, they should have set it up nicely for you. But otherwise, if you're playing with anything, we want it to be closer on the servo and as far out as possible on the surface. Any questions there? How we doing?
Good.
Cool. Okay, so that's it for tips and tricks that I have. Moving on to the next subject. Hang on a second. Okay, so you should see that now.
Yeah.
Okay, so batteries. On the subject of batteries. So between the session we did previously on batteries and then talking with lots of other you guys in the meantime, I thought it'd be good to just revisit this quickly. So the first thing I wanted to say is it's probably best to always think of your battery and checking your battery referring to the cell voltage, not the total voltage. Because regardless of whether it's a 1S, 2S, 3S, 4S, 5S, 6S, no matter what the series inside the battery and the maximum voltage it can do, all the cell voltages are the same across any size battery. So whether it's a 2S or a 6S, the cell voltages are always the same, okay? What are targets that we're gonna talk about, where we wanna be. So it's probably always best to think of your batteries and talk about your batteries and check and monitor your batteries based on cell voltages, okay? And the other thing I'm gonna tell especially the new guys or anyone who's not doing this is always check your batteries before you fly and after you're flying. You're checking them before because if you haven't done it already, you will do it someday. You've got multiple batteries out there you've charged, and halfway through flying, and Al's like, oh yeah, you flew this battery, you're having fun, you're talking to people, then you grab that battery again, not the other one that's charged, and you put it in your plane and you take off, and it will let you, it'll be fine to go out and take off. And a minute or so into the flight, you're gonna be like, oh my God, I don't have throttle here, this is dying. So I always check my battery as I'm putting it in the plane, and I'll show you some checkers in a minute. And check it after you fly because you're verifying that you flew it down to the right voltage and not too low. So, and the other thing you're watching is not just cell voltages, but the difference between the voltages. So I'll show you one of them here. So this guy, this checker, says it's a 3-cell, all up, it's that voltage, and there's number 1 voltage, number 2, and so on. But it doesn't tell you the difference between them because that's how we know things are starting to go bad. So this guy, do I have that right? Yep, I do. So this guy cycles through and tells you all of them, the individuals, but when it comes around here in a second, it's going to tell us the max difference. So my screen's backwards, So this little checker, what's nice is it reports after the total voltage, it reports the max difference it saw between all the cells. So at a quick glance, I can go, ooh, it's getting out of balance. Something's wrong. One of the cells is not happy. And there's also checkers. So there's other checkers you can buy that. Let me plug a big one into this one so you can see it. So if you don't have checkers, get some checkers. So this one just shows everything at a glance, doesn't rummage through it. Okay. So I thought about it. I think it's important to always stay up on batteries for everybody at the club because so much of what we fly is batteries. So
Chris, there's another thing I'd recommend, and
yeah,
that I've been doing for 3 or 4 years now, and you really should test your batteries under load,
yeah,
at least the larger ones. So they have load testers. I use it at the field constantly. You put it on, you look at the voltage, but it's not under load. So you might check it at 0.5 amps or 1 amp. And that way you get a feel for the discharge rate.
Gotcha. Yep. And
the old days, nickel metal hydrides used to be notorious for showing a great voltage until it got under a load, and then you'd find your problem the hard way.
Yep. And
well, same deal goes. Lithium ion batteries, you can see the voltage drop. Life batteries, the same old problem. You get a nice high voltage until it decides to die.
I've heard my life batteries that I can't load check them. Basically, they do drop down to a certain voltage, but Mike PQ mentioned that, yeah, trying to do a load check on a life battery is problematic.
they're
I switched to
discharge curves.
lithium ion.
Yep.
I switched to lithium ion because of that.
Yep. So just to review the basics, you're typically charging to 4.2 volts, but that's should be governed by your charger. So depending on the charger you're using. So if guys are asking, what do I typically charge to? That should be controlled by the charger. And when you're flying, you're targeting to land and have a battery in that 3.7, 3.8 range. That varies. You can argue about going lower or stopping sooner, whatever. I recommend if you have the function on your radio to have a timer, you should be using it. How do you end up figuring out the time? Well, on a new plane, you're going to fly it short enough to land and check it in the first flights. And you're going to dial in on a time that when you land, taxi back or get the plane and check it, you're in that proper, you're around 3.7, 3.8 volts. Okay. And you're going to see that. And the other reason to check it after flying is inevitably you get a new plane in the first handful of flights, you get your timer dialed in, say 5 minutes. The more you fly that plane, you're probably going to start flying it more and more aggressively. And if you're checking after the flights, you're going to start to see that voltage drop because you're flying it more aggressively. And so you may end up backing that time off over until you settle into a flying habit for that plane. So using a timer function on your radio, reminding you of the time as you fly, and you land accordingly. Okay. Modern chargers, well, all chargers, you charge using both leads, but you can charge with just the mains. But unless for special reasons, and sometimes we do it, some of us do it, every time you charge, you should be using both of these and selecting balance charge on your charger. Okay. So for any new guys wondering about that, when all possible, balance charge your batteries. Any questions there? Any comments?
I got a storage question for you.
Yep.
And of course, I'm one of the new guys, and so I buy the new stuff and it dummy proofs it more and more.
Yes.
So I appreciate learning. And so on storage mode, I just checked. I'm just using these 3 cells. It's storing at 3. I just checked it, 3.81 across all 3 cells. Is that's just what it does? Okay.
Yep.
And so, but typically, if you're landing, ideally, you're trying to land it at storage, basically close to the storage level. Is that true, or just slightly under?
Yep.
I'm always setting it to storage, but there really isn't much change because I'm almost there anyway.
There's the discussion and practice of how do I be the most kindest person to this battery that it could ever be versus I don't care that much to be super kind to it. And if I don't get 400 flights out of it and I only get 200 or 300, I'm okay because the battery only cost me $26. So, or whatever it costs. So that's where the whole, there's lots of good forums online you can go look at, and there's lots of discussions and arguments around this whole subject. So these are all just generalities. And so, yeah, we may fly it down to 3.7 and you may not choose to, every time you're done flying, to storage charge them back up to 3.85. And how does that hurt the battery over time? May not even be measurable, whether it, again, right, you either have to keep track of whether you got 300 flights or 400 flights or 200 flights out of a battery to know the difference. But generally speaking, your plane doesn't even last that long usually.
So, Alan, my experience, I'm on that end where I just treat my batteries like hell. And so basically, I mean, I've left my batteries charged and forgot to discharge them. And a couple of weeks later, I'll go fly it. Of course, I'll do as Chris said, I'll check the voltage. It's still up there. But what that means over time, from what I've learned, is your lifetime of that battery being able to recharge all the way to full charge does decrease ever so minutely each time we do it. So also, when you're saying you store at the 3.85 volts, you have to have a definition of, well, how much time goes by before you decide to store that battery. So you discharge it to 3.7, next week you charge it back up and fly it. The storage voltage difference for that 1 week is negligible. It's not going to matter. If you didn't fly that battery for 2 months, some people would just freak out and go, you didn't put that back to storage voltage? Like Chris said, there's a lot of people who write down every single flight and every single voltage, and they keep track of their battery performance right to an obsessive point, at least I consider it obsessive. But basically, you don't want to leave your battery fully charged, a LiPo, and storing it at that voltage anywhere around that area is going to be fine.
Okay. This smart charger has storage and then it has discharge, and I've just been using storage because I have flown some over the winter with ski. Like I'm not sitting waiting for 6 months, and it seems fine. So it seems like if I ended up with lots of different batteries and ended up not flying one particular size for a long time, would it be preferable to put it in discharge, or you just always use storage? Because I guess I don't know what the point of discharge
The
is.
difference between discharge and storage mode is discharge only discharges down to whatever voltage has been set on that for that option, and then stops discharging. Storage charges or discharges as necessary to reach 3.85.
I thought you were gonna say it because I did fly one below and it ended up putting it back up.
Puts it back in, yes. So discharge only discharges, storage does both.
Okay.
To achieve 3.85 per cell too. So it's gonna adjust all the cells, as best it can.
Well, the
And
little charger works great.
So like Al said, don't leave batteries sitting around fully charged for too long. How is too long? There's a whole nother, that'll bring fisticuffs, at any RC get together.
No, but pretty much anything is too long, right? Because if we go to the flying field and you charge to 4.2 volts, and then you don't get to use that model. So it's say 50 degrees in the afternoon there at the flying field. You put it in your box, you bring it to your garage gets hot, gets up to 80, 90 degrees. If you check that battery, now it's going to be at 4.3 volts, 4.35 volts. Now you let it sit like that a month or 2 weeks, the battery doesn't like it. So if we're at the flying field and you get a flight on your plane, you take your battery out and it's and if you don't use it for another 6 weeks, if you can get it under 4 volts, under 3.9, you're okay. But yeah, try not to leave it at 4.2. They don't like it for too long. Has been my experience.
Yep.
There are some.
Go ahead, Ted.
There are some devices available now. As soon as you're done flying, you stick them on your battery, and it brings them down to the appropriate discharge level. You can just stick them in your case and leave them there and recharge them when you come back. They're kind of nice.
Yeah, what I was going to say, and wondered if any of the guys have experimented with this little battery checker alarm that you can set for whatever trigger voltage you want, 3.7 or even lower or higher. And you can use it to check your battery before you fly. I think it's made by Viper, and it'll chirp when it reaches that low voltage. So it may even chirp, before your timer goes off, but it can get annoying because it will, it'll start chirping if you do like a flyby at 50% throttle and then you throttle up, it'll start chirping and then you bring back the throttle and it'll go away, but it seems to work well.
Yeah, a lot of them look like this, except there's two little piezos on the end here. And that's what they're for. For some folks, that's what they're meant for, is you put them in the plane. And like you said, though, the problem is as the battery is getting low and you still have like a minute to fly, when you go full throttle, the battery voltage dips. So we talked about this before. The voltage coming out of the battery is not constant. It's varying depending on your throttle setting and how much current's being pulled out of it. So you can.
Those alarms can be super annoying. Because in an EDF, when Chris on a big EDF, you go to take off, the voltage, it's not uncommon for it to go down to 3.3, 3.4, 3.5 for a few seconds. And those alarms are just screaming at you.
Yeah.
But as soon as you back off the throttle a little bit, the voltage comes right back up.
Cool. Anything else on batteries that one has questions on?
The only other point I might want to come up with, your charger will charge your battery to 4.2 volts per cell. And by the time you check it at the field and you're ready to fly, I've had people ask me, well, I can't get it to go to 4.2. It won't stay at 4.2. It's only at 4.18 or 4.17 or 4.19. And is that a problem? And I told them, nope, go fly it. And but it seems like some people are like, hey, it's supposed to be 4.2. Why can't I charge it to 4.2 and have it stay there? And I think that comes back to, well, the battery in pristine shape would do that, but no battery is going to stay in pristine shape. So
Yeah. A LiPo battery is a little bit springy. And that's why as soon as you land after flying, if you check the battery voltage immediately, as soon as it was on the ground, you could check it, it's going to be down here. And in 30 seconds, a minute, it's climbing, and it's going to asymptotically stop at some point. And so they're not constant. And the charger charges them to, depending on the charger, charges right around that 4.2 and then stops. And that springiness of that LiPo chemistry is going to let it settle back down a little bit to a resting state.
All right, and if you consider that you want to charge at 4.2 and call it quits at 3.8, that's about 80% of the use of the battery across 0.4 of a volt. So
Yeah.
if you're only 0.02 volts or 0.01 volts off, you're missing maybe a couple percent of flight time. It's not enough to worry.
Yep.
And the charger monitors lots of things. These chargers are super smart. So it's seeing, hey, I'm putting the voltage into the battery. How much is it taking it? How is it tapering off? It's trying to match all the cells and get to 4.2, but it often, there might be a cell at 4.18, 4.19. It's just going to stop because it's not taking any more current. So it's going to try not to blow up. So it just stops.
And most of our chargers, so like here's a 2600. Most of our chargers, when they're done charging, show you on the screen how many milliamps it put back into the battery. So you haven't flown the battery since the last time you're out, but then you charge it before you go fly. You can look and see, oh, it put this much back in, and I get a measure of how much was out and going back in. And if you even watch that, you can start to sense, oh yeah, that battery is not as healthy anymore. There's some of our chargers, the ones that I have and some of us have, other guys have them, they have a battery analysis function. It takes quite a few hours to run, but it'll analyze your battery periodically. You can put it on and check it if you start to suspect it. And that's good for these more, $100 batteries where, you're worried more about it in the plane.
No, so hold that one up again. So that's a good example. So that 2600. So if you go down to 3.8 volts, it's unlikely you'll put more than 2000 milliamps or 2100 back into it. If you run it down enough so it's down to 3.6 volts, 3.5 volts, it's all puffy, it's hot, you're going to find out you're going to put 2500 back in it. And again, the battery doesn't like that. That's a good side view. So Chris is taking good care of that battery. It's nice, sharp edges. It's hard as a rock. It'll last a long time like that if you don't beat on it too much. Now, if Al was to go on his batteries, they wouldn't look like that. He's got duct tape to keep them down so they don't. Yeah.
I beat up my batteries. If they come back hot after flying, you're doing it wrong.
Or you're doing it right. I don't know.
Right.
I'm getting everything out of that one flight, but the next one won't be quite so stellar.
Yes.
Can I ask you one more quick question?
Yes.
On this smart charger, it has an option on what current you want. And I've just used whatever the default is, but when I was spinning the wheel around and went to hit start on whatever, I wasn't in the right spot, and then it changed, and then I thought, oh crap, maybe I'm going to screw things up. It's not radical, but there's like 5.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, 0.6. It just seems to default to 5.5. What is that? Is there anything critical to know?
Yes. Lots.
Okay.
Do you want me to answer, or Mark, you want to answer?
No, so I'll give the quick on it. So the battery, if you want to be nice to your battery, charge them at 1C. So what does 1C mean? So that 5,000 milliamp battery up there, 1C would be 5 amps. That means if the battery was completely drained, it's going to take an hour to charge, but it's only putting 5 amps in it. If you want to charge it at 2C, so that would be 10 amps. Now, if the battery was completely depleted, you could get it charged in half an hour, or go up to 4C and it would be charged in 15 minutes. The higher you charge it, you are shortening the life of the battery, and you have to say, do I really need to charge it at that high of a rate? So the smart chargers are going to mostly default to 1C or 2C, so it's not a problem at all. But a lot of these batteries, like the bottom one that Chris has, that one can be charged like 3 to 5C. But who needs a battery charged in like 6 or 8 minutes? You often don't need that quick of a charge. So most of the time at home, I charge my batteries at 1C. I'm fine with that. And at the field, most of the high quality batteries, you can easily charge them at 2C and it doesn't hurt them at all. They still stay hard as a rock. They don't get hot and puffy. and they're rated for it. So just read on the side of the battery. The higher quality battery you buy, the quicker you can charge it.
This one says max charge 3C.
Which means
Oh,
50.
and then it converts it to 6.6. So I'm at 5. So I'm not.
You're good.
That's not a problem. Okay.
Not a problem at all.
And most, like I'm looking at all these, none of these batteries say the max charge on them, but I bet most of them, when I go back to the website where, you know, the Hobby King or where you get these Gen Z's, it'll say it on there. It'll say it on the website. Hey, this is a max 2C or whatever, you know, charging. So.
Well, it doesn't take that long anyway. I mean, it's like maybe 12, 15 minutes and you're done.
Well, it's just simple math. So 1C on a totally charged battery will take an hour, discharge battery. And then 2C will be a half hour, 4C will be 15 minutes. But you never really have one that's totally discharged. You have it 80% discharge.
Yeah.
So then it's, you know, 45 minutes.
Cool.
But 2C is generally safe for most of these batteries.
And conversely, you can always charge it less than 1C. If your power supply can't put out the amount of current for all the batteries you're trying to charge at that time, and you want to cut them back, it just takes more time to charge, doesn't hurt them.
Nope, your battery's going to last even
charge
longer.
it half a C or whatever.
So is that just math? 3C 6.6 would be
That's it.
2.2, 4.
You got it.
Got it. Okay.
Woohoo.
I
Yeah.
should read more.
No, it's confusing. It really is. So those are all good questions because, you know, people jump into the hobby with all these different components, mix and match. And it's like, yeah, you're not born with this understanding. It can be very confusing.
And trying to like judge, like, is this battery discharged or charged based on the total voltage? Then you're constantly doing like, okay, what's 3.8 times 6 is, you know.
Well, so that battery, Chris, read on the side of it. So what is that? Is that a 60C battery, 90? What is that thing?
This one's a 75C discharge. 75C all day.
Right.
Not the peak.
That's by 5
continuous.
amps. Yep.
So that's a battery that can put out whatever that works out to be.
190
450
amps.
450 amps. Yeah, you could start your car with that. So these little batteries have ridiculous power.
Yeah, that's that. We're talking discharge amperage.
Yeah,
not
75.
amps, just so,
75 times 5. That's a lot.
for discharge. Yes, we're talking. Just so we don't lose the new
375 amps can come out of that baby at one time.
all day too for the whole flight. Really, is what it's saying because it's 75 continuous. Yeah.
Yeah, but we know they all lie. It's just it's just a number on the sticker.
That's how Al flies his.
Yeah, that's
All good electricians use a 75% rule. You never go over 75% of rated capacities.
There you go.
I'm actually finding that pretty good for batteries
Yep.
to eliminate the puff factor.
So I think the interesting thing is no matter what we're flying at the field, electric, gas, glow, turbine, everything has batteries in it, right? So being good.
Yeah, do I need to check my batteries after I wipe all the oil and crap off my plane, or should I do it before or after? I'm kidding.
Use the same rag too. That you,
well, and of course,
Same
Chris
rate.
last year, doubled our capacity at our charging station at the field. So now we have double the batteries. So we've been able to put a ton of chargers at our charge port at the field and keeps everybody going.
Yep. So the next moving along, unless someone has
So
more.
did you guys, can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Did you guys talk about sources for batteries at all yet?
Not yet.
Real quick, where's a couple of good places, economical places to buy batteries?
Hard to beat Hobby King.
Yeah.
But also guys are getting stuff that's out of stock. Shockingly, Amazon has a bunch of batteries in stock that are pretty good.
Yeah, right. Besides the where to buy, a lot of times it's which types or what company to buy from. LiPos, like Gen's Ace, and when you go to Hobby King, you have like 3 different varieties of batteries there. Nano something, the Turnigy series.
Rhino.
So
yeah.
it comes down to, usually the manufacturer, not the actual place you're buying or what where you're buying it from.
So what's a good manufacturer?
So Jeff Jeff Kendrick was just reading the other day and shared with me, and we haven't bought it yet, and I don't even know if he told you, Mark. These guys, SMC Racing, SMC-Racing. Their name came up because on one of the forums, RC Group's forum, there's a long-standing thread about batteries, and recent tests on these guys' batteries say they're performing really, really well, and their prices are lower, considerably lower, and the performance means the current you get out of them versus the weight. So this is a great battery, but I have a little bit of a weight penalty using it. It's a little heavier. That's why it works better. But these SMC Racing ones are supposed to be really, really good.
So hold that battery up again. So
this-
that one is the Turnigy graphene.
Yeah.
It's a slightly different
Yeah.
technology than the normal lipos. They're a little bit heavier, but that is one amazing battery. So and they have them in all different sizes. So if you have a plane that can handle the weight, a little bit extra weight penalty, it's hard to beat those graphene batteries. So look, hold it up again. So even the simple things like the wiggle the wires that go in for the power there, those are silicone wires. See how nice and flexible they are with nice connectors. Yeah. They built a really nice battery. It's just a tiny bit heavy.
Comes with XT90s on it. They can handle the current.
Yeah.
I think I put that on there as a protector. The other thing, while we're talking batteries, because we are still, if you don't do this already, I name and number all my batteries, because that just
Best advice ever.
helps me to keep track, especially that whole issue of putting being as pedantic as I am, I'll get to the field with my flying batteries and I put them on the left side of the car, and after I've flown them, I put them on the right. But I also fly. This would be my second flight of the day. I fly Scorpion 1 first, and then I fly Scorpion 2. So it helps me. I don't get mixed up as easily with my batteries.
Well, and Chris is only 50. Once you get over 60, you need to do that because you reach in your battery box and you pull a battery out and you say, I don't even know what battery this goes to. I must have an airplane. I don't even know. So those stickers are a big help.
Yeah.
Label your
My
airplane
stickers
with
are-
the battery you use. Yeah.
Well,
My
Dave,
stickers are a little less sophisticated. Mine are duct tape written on.
That's fine. That's fine. Doesn't matter.
Whatever identifies. Dave, one other manufacturer that I just bought for the trainers, actually I got them at Neat, is called Roaring Top, which you know it's not a fantastic name, but Roaring Top, I don't know, they're making some decent batteries. So I mean Gens Ace,
Glacier, yep.
have been a good names.
So
Roaring Top, they don't have all the voltage or sizes that you would probably like, but I've bought several of the 3-cell 3300s from them, and they're holding up and they are working really well. So there's going to
Now,
be.
is that a manufacturer or a website?
That's a manufacturer. You can go to the Roaring Top website and look them over. There's going to be another easily, 6 to 8, very, very good manufacturers. However, you've also got the other side. There's always a few who are really, like Mark said, well, they're reading it for 50C, 70C performance, and they never live up to it. So
like you said, Gens Ace is the website's Gens Tattoo, but this brand here, Gens Ace, and then the other one was. On Buddy RC, there's Glacier batteries. They've been pretty nice.
anyways, well,
Good.
we went to Neat and we found, I think, Glaciers there, and we found Roaring Tops there, and the Roaring Tops were like $15 for a 3,000 milliamp 3-cell battery. I was like, oh, these can't be any good. They gotta be crap.
Yeah.
Turned out they're great. And
And
the price was like amazing. So
there's some other names too that tend to own. They're a little more expensive. They tend to be used more by the EDF guys and some other stuff. So we don't need to throw those names out here. But if you're really starting to look for some more higher performance stuff, give Mark or I a yell.
I was thinking of building
Thunder Power. What's that, Ted?
I was going to build a spot welder so I can weld my own. You can buy on Amazon. You can buy the whatever batteries you want individually. Like lithium ions, because I want big 5200 receiver batteries, double of them in my planes.
Yeah.
And, they're fairly expensive, but if you buy the batteries separately and you spot weld them, you're done.
Yeah.
We have been known to help a few people fix batteries only have a 6S that goes bad and it's only one cell, you
Yeah.
can take it apart and replace the cell and put it back together. But boy, you want to be careful. Again, you got a lot of current right there. It's not the time to short anything out, or it's super bad.
Do it outside.
Absolutely right. You can get, you got to be extremely careful with that.
Yep. So we fixed a bunch
So
of them.
boys, I'm down in Florida, and I was out at the flying field today, and this guy shows up. Okay, let me see. Some scale, maybe.
Is
There's
it
a
turbine?
cockpit. Yeah,
Nice.
oh yeah, it's big there. So there's how big it is.
Yeah.
And let's see. Now it is going. Where the hell am I? I don't know.
So
I don't know if you
there's
can see that, but anyway.
there's a number of
That's a-
jet rallies in the Northeast to attend. So if any guys are interested in going to see some of these big jets, just check with us where current jet rallies are. So the other two topics that were asked for was basic aerobatics and talking about landings. So I brought my model today. So the basic aerobatics that were asked for were loops, rolls, and knife edge. So I'll give you my 2 cents, and then Al and I know Mark can share their thoughts and wisdom on it. So in the beginning, don't be doing any of these without like a Mark or an Al next to you at the field to help you do your first ones. But loops, inherently, if you just are flying along and you start rolling to do a loop, your plane's going to drop, and you're going to come out of the loop pointing down and much lower than you probably started.
You just showed a roll.
What's that? Oh,
You
sorry.
should show us a roll.
Roll. Okay. So that's why I'm not an actor, right? So early on, learning basic rolls. So if we give a little up first before we roll it over, it's going to come out of the roll not as low and not as pointing down. And when you get really good at it, you can feed in some rudder so she doesn't drop off, feed in some elevator to keep it level, feed in some more, and then get rid of the rudder and go back to some more rudder. And you can do the whole thing nice and straight. But in the beginning, you're going to give like 15 degrees up, a little throttle, and then roll it over, and you'll come out not too bad. But again, you're going to get someone next to you first to talk you through it before you go up and try it. So loops, the gist of a loop, of course, is you got to have plenty of speed and power going into it so you can make it over the top. So all of this is depending on the plane, of course. I mean, there's going to be lots of planes we fly at the field that don't like doing rolls and loops just because of the way they're constructed. But on a loop, there's got to be enough speed to get you over the top, but we also don't want to keep the throttle on after we come over the top, because now we're going to go roaring back down. And starting high enough up that we don't end up too low, okay? And any comments on those, Al, Mark?
Just that if you do a loop and the plane's symmetrical, you won't have to worry about hitting the ground. It should come out right at the same level it started the loop.
Yep.
However, if you have a plane that is like losing it, or if you twitch halfway through it, then you do want to make sure you're up high enough. Start at that 2 mistake high level and then bring yourself down to 1 mistake high, and then after that you're on your own. So.
And the appropriate amount of elevator, it's not full elevator either. It's appropriate amount of elevator to draw that circle in the sky that you're trying to draw. Providing you have enough speed to get up and over the top.
You can make your loops as big or as small as you want. The plane needs to be more powerful to make the nice, big, huge loop.
The other thing,
just to remember exactly like you said, on the down, once you started your loop and you're on the, once you come over the top, cut your throttle back, because you see people panic, they give all kinds of throttle to get up into the loop. They come around the top and now they're going way too fast. So now what happens is you just get more up elevator, and then the wings are folded. So you can do a loop on pretty much any airplane. Just, remember to use the throttle as much as you need going up. But once you come over the top, you can cut back, and almost any plane, even a jet, can finish the loop without much throttle. You have the weight of the airplane and
And
gravity.
you may start three mistakes high, dive a little bit to pick up some speed, and then carry that speed through. The other thing to think about is, as you're going into the loop, you're at that time, your orientation is good in your head. That left is towards you and right's away from you, for the way I'm holding this one. It's always the same throughout the loop. So if right is away from you as you go into the loop, over the top, right is still away from you. A right stick still puts the plane away from you, and left stick brings it towards you. So as you're going over the top, if it's starting to do one or the other, you can keep that straight in your head for keeping it oriented like this throughout the loop. Okay.
Into the wind is a preferable direction, or do you think it makes no difference as far as orienting yourself with a tailwind or a headwind? It feels like going into the wind is gonna take you up and over a lot easier.
It
Yes.
is. Into the wind is definitely the way to start practicing. Yes.
So that's the basics of loops and rolls. The other one was knife edge. So knife edge is where it gets a little tricky. Do that like 5 mistakes high first. And every plane's going to respond different to knife edge. How much rudder it needs during the knife edge, and then whether or not the plane tends to want to flop back like this during knife edge or come over like this during knife edge, depends. And so it's going to take, depending on the plane, it's going to take, could take much more stick input to hold it during knife edge.
Exactly. If you want to do a knife edge all the way down the runway, your hands are moving a lot, because now your rudder is your elevator is your rudder, and whatever coupling the airplane has based on lots of things, your CG, your the design of the airplane, the wing, all those kinds of things, you're doing little corrections with the ailerons all the time. So like Chris said, start higher, keep an eye on it, because most of the time people try to do a knife edge too slow and they're losing altitude all the time, and that ground comes up quick. So you always want to be thinking, all right, so Chris, do your plane, do fly level. So now usually it's easier to do canopy towards yourself rather than belly towards yourself. So Chris is doing it towards us, so that's great. So you go into your, if you go into your knife edge like that, just be thinking all the time, when I've had enough of my knife edge, how am I getting out? So you don't get confused. So if I did a right aileron to come in my knife edge, I want to do a right aileron and come back out of my knife edge, so you can get back to level. Because if you wait until it's too late, then we're going to be picking up airplane parts in the field. So knife edge is super fun. It's not necessarily that hard, but on most planes, you want to carry some good speed. The faster you go, the easier it is, the less rudder it needs. And some planes, you know, again, depending on the design of the plane, do it better than others. But kind of once you get that technique down, there's all kinds of tricks you can do with it, right? You can do knife edge loops, knife edge figure eights. You can do, you could get all knife edge snaps are super fun, all kinds of crazy things, but it starts with that knife edge. And people, when you go back to the loop, everyone thinks a loop is easy, but I'm telling you, when guys are good at doing inside or outside loops, and they can constantly correct for the wind, and it looks like, you know, and do snaps at the top and bottom of a loop, a nice, pretty loop is not easy. Just like a nice roll. People say, oh, roll so easy, I just throw the aileron stick. Not really. If you're making little corrections all the way, if you watch a guy do rolls all the way around the field, that's an expert pilot. That takes a lot of stick time to do that. But you start high and don't get too low to the ground.
As pretty as a nice slow roll going up and down the runway.
I love it. You want to go over and shake that guy's.
If you're just beginning, you want to make these maneuvers quick and get them over with and learn from them.
So one thing that helped me learn knife edge was standing at the field. You do it to your reference, and I'd fly down that way, and I make my turn to come back down the field, and I'm turning, and I would stay in knife edge. So I'd finish my turn into knife edge.
Using rudder to make the turn. Yeah.
Well, I'm using elevator. I'm using, you know, I'm just making a normal turn, but instead of flattening back out and flying down the runway, I would just stay up on edge and feed in the rudder and start flying into my knife edge. It just
knife edge circle.
It just helped me transition into the knife edge to learn it. So So knife edge, and we'll talk about inverted too. Knife edge and inverted for me were both maneuvers that in the beginning, I wasn't getting on the controls quick enough. I'd roll up into knife edge and then start thinking about, oh, I got to add rudder. Well, it was too late at that point. The rudder had to be coming on as I went into it. Likewise, inverted is the real killer. So most of our planes are trimmed. A lot of planes are trimmed where there's a little bit of up, incidence to it. So that works against you when you go inverted. It makes the plane want to go like this. And so if you're going to practice inverted, that's 4 mistakes high up when you practice it. Right as you're going over, if you're not feeding in, pushing your elevator at this point, by the time it comes over, it's too late. It's diving on you. And so setting up a new plane, that's one of the tests that I do, is flip it over and see how much push it needs to control it. But the interesting thing about flying around inverted is the only thing about banking and yanking that's backwards is the elevator. You're pushing on the elevator, but you're still doing, it's not reversed for roll. Roll is still the same. So it's so once you've done it enough, you get used to, instead of pulling through the turns, you're pushing through the turns.
You brought something up that I thought of, was basically in aerobatics, any maneuver you're making, a best practice is once you feel like the plane isn't doing what you had expected it to, you need to quit the maneuver.
Yeah.
And there's so many times you get the plane upside down, you go, oh, I just need to make this correction. Too late. If you're thinking I need to make a correction and you are already in a maneuver, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
And so that's the hardest part that it takes to learn. You see me doing a rolling Harrier, and it's like all of a sudden, it's like the plane is not where I expected it to be, and I blipped the throttle, and now I'm in trouble. I'm not ready to crash, but I'm in trouble. And you have to learn and mentally break out of maneuver, save the plane, get back, try that again. The very first mistake you make should be your last attempt at making an aerobatic maneuver.
Yep. Cool. So landings was our next thing. Is anyone have any other questions on any kind of aerobatic stuff?
I'll just give a plug again for the simulators, because
Yep.
that's great. And
that too.
My son keeps asking me how come I can't do knife edges. He's like got that down and flying around like he's some hot shot, and I'm like, I'm not quite. For some reason, that one doesn't quite. I gotta practice.
Simulators, definitely use a simulator. If you're having trouble with any kind of maneuver, I spent like a half an hour, like every day in the wintertime, teaching myself how to do the hovers, how to do the Harriers, how to do all the other stuff. So definitely, when you get to the field, of course, the plane acts completely different than the simulator plane, but the controls and how you have learned the rhythms and all that comes into, works with the simulators.
Okay. So landings. Landings are the punctuation on the end of our flying sentence, isn't it? I'll start out by covering a couple things, and then I know Mark and Al can fill in all the details we need. But so landings are tough for me for a while, because most of the time we fly, and we see this in a commercial plane. So think next time you're flying on a commercial flight somewhere, think about this. When you're up and flying a plane, everything we do is the right stick. We want to go up, we pull elevator and we go up. We don't want to go down, we let off the elevator. We want to turn, we do this. But the key one is the up and down. We're doing everything with the right-hand stick. The problem is when it comes to landing, we have to flip our brains. We shouldn't be. It's better to control the landing with throttle, not with the right stick. Because at the point of landing, once you get good at it, you are now hopefully thinking of, I'm only using the right stick to set the appropriate attack angle of the plane, and I'm using throttle to make it go up and down. And the difference is that right there. We don't want the plane doing this during landing. We want it to do this during landing. And it's throttle that controls that. Okay. So that's the biggest curve to get over for landing. Also to say that RC planes defy many laws of physics of flying. You know, when Al or any of us are hovering a plane hanging on the prop, you know, most real planes don't do that. They don't hang around on their propeller and then accelerate upwards out of it. So, you know, we're already dealing with something that defies a lot of laws of physics and flight. So that just makes landings even a little more weirder because the plane can do things that normal planes don't do. So go ahead.
Yeah, just wanted to add that, like in full scale flight instruction, your elevator, you're taught that the elevator controls the angle of attack of the wing. Yes. And it is your throttle that controls your altitude. So that's the thing that makes ours seem to defy physics is that our power to weight ratios are just so crazily extreme. And that most of the time we're flying around, even straight and level flight, we're flying around at a power setting that exceeds what's needed for that. That's why you can just add elevator and you ascend. You've changed the angle of attack of the wing. But in order to change your altitude, you've got to have power input. Yep. And because we are so overpowered, that's what makes it go up. But what you're saying is this is really key to a nice looking landing. When you see a pilot really grease one in, that's usually what they're doing, is controlling it with their throttle. And the other thing I'll add is that a lot of times what I do, especially with a new plane, it's easier when there's no one at the field, but take off, go round, land, take off, go round, land. I will do that. I'll run dozens of batteries through a plane, just doing that, practicing landings. And my issue is missing the corn. So as you all know, I need to do that. You all are probably better than me, but practice makes perfect.
Yep.
And you're right, it's not defined.
What do you use for steering? Do you use airline or do you use rudder?
Depends.
Sometimes both.
Yep.
Crosswind, you got to use both.
Yep.
But
rudder is extremely useful, though.
I'm an aileron type guy. I mean, I won't be touching my rudder on a normal approach to land. But if I'm in some kind of a crosswind, then I will find that I will aileron myself closer to the ground, but I do have to touch a rudder here and there. So.
Yep. Yeah, you do have to end up, a little bit of crosswind, you have to use both, right? The ailerons will keep your wings level, but if the plane's coming in an angle, you're going to have to use some rudder. I think one of the things that probably people struggle with in the beginning is bad habits that you learn on the trainer, which is get out away from the runway 100 feet, kill the throttle, and you just glide it in. That's your landing. So they get not comfortable making small throttle adjustments, which is bad. You can even do much nicer landings with your trainer if you're doing little throttle adjustments and little elevator adjustments to, exactly like Mike just said, to grease it in. But to do that, you have to fly it. You know that term, fly it all the way in. Yeah, you fly it all the way into the ground. You can't just cut it and coast. Tony was always a big proponent of that, about, every flight is going to end with a landing of some sort. So you might as well get good at it early on, and you'll be fixing a lot less airplanes and gluing a lot less landing gear. And he's right about that. So every landing doesn't have to end up with gluing your landing gear back on. It's just, like Mike said, go back and practice with the same plane over and over and over again, and carry a little bit of speed, and it stops that. Cut the throttle, glide it in until it plops. You can get away with that on a 60-inch foam trainer. But as your planes start getting bigger and heavier and they need to fly, you kind of can't get away with that quite as much anymore.
Yep.
I guess I'll just add with what Mark said. Gene Kutu, my instructor from back in 2000, fly that plane to all the way. I mean, and not just till the wheels touch the ground. It's the whole roll down the runway, slowing down. You're flying that plane till it stops. And that's,
yeah. I
mean, I did the same thing Mark's saying. I mean, we would take our trainer, we would get 3 feet off the ground, we're lined up, kill the throttle and watch what happens. Doesn't always turn out as well as you expect. So it's really, you watch that plane. And another thing on landings is the approach. You come in, and if you get twisted up and you're like left is right is switching around, abort that landing. Don't be afraid to like get off and get out, come back around, try it again. practice, practice, practice. I don't know what else I could possibly add to that, only there is a trick that I use on new pilots when I'm training them. If they get disoriented on landings because left is becoming right to them and right's becoming left, which goes away after, you know, an hour of practice landings. But you can kind of like look over your shoulder and pointing the transmitter the other way, which keeps the orientation the way you expect it to be. So if you're all by yourself, you need help landing, try that. Just turn yourself, look behind yourself a little bit with the transmitter out in front of you, and you won't get twisted up between left and right.
Yep. So the basics are some of the key things to work on are always getting lined up at the runway. So you're coming down, making your turns.
It's hard to do sometimes.
Whether it's one long arcing turn or a turn to be 90 to the runway, then another turn to line up with the runway, and then staying down the center of the runway. So if you find yourself always being too close or too far, you have to make that adjustment in your head to say, okay, I've learned from this, I got to move over more one way or the other, and then keeping it down the center of the runway. As Mark was saying too, airspeed, it's all about airspeed. So if the plane's coming in for landing and it's starting to nose up, you're probably going to be losing airspeed if you're not increasing throttle. So plane's not going to fly unless there's air over the wings. So coming in for a landing, a little nose down means you're always going to keep some airspeed up, and you don't have to use as much throttle either. And so one of the rules of thumbs I've read and seen reported on is take 2 times the wingspan above the runway, and that's about the time you should be transitioning a little bit. For a straight wing plane. For a straight wing plane, if you're coming in properly, about 2 times the wingspan above is when you start changing your attitude and slowing down to land.
You also should learn your plane's stall speed.
Yep.
Basically, you fly it 20 feet off the ground and you just make an approach to like you would be doing a landing, and then let your plane slow down. And just as soon as it starts to feel really mushy and it looks like it feels like it's going to fall out of the air, speed back up, and at least now you're not, 5 feet off the ground and stalling and crashing into the runway. So just get a feel for the plane's stall speed.
Well, let's talk about that stall speed a little bit when you're landing. One of the things that is really helpful is you're coming, everything's apropos, but let's say you're down towards a runway and you got a little speed. Give it more elevator as it slows down. Just keep giving it elevator, and when it's ready, it'll just settle nice and easily down to the deck. So if you do it really right, that elevator should be almost all the way up when it touches down.
Yep. And I'm sure we probably all experienced this through the beginning of the hobby to where we're at now, is that we oversticked in the beginning. And so getting to that point where, like Ted just said, these things are pretty small stick movements at about that time when you're landing. You're making very small throttle changes and slowly. And the reason he's saying you're feeding in elevators because the nose is starting to drop because you've backed off the throttle to slow down. So you've got to maintain that angle that you want at that time. But that's the difficult part of this hobby. I have a guy at work who's just learning to fly the tiny whoop stuff that he bought one. And in the beginning, I warned him, and he's oversticking. He's starting to get beyond that now to where he's not doing large stick movements. He's able to do smaller and smaller and get better control. So we're talking little, especially on the throttle, because electrics can be a little touchy, depending on the power you have in that plane. So.
Chris, any advice as far as the differences between landing a plane with tricycle gear, where obviously you want to hit the mains first and the nose protected, but on tail dragger, do you aspire to do a wheel landing or try to do a 3-point landing, or any philosophy on that?
Should always be on the main gear, no matter what, I believe, right? So if it's a tail dragger, I would still be landing it about like this, and then let the tail settle down. And same, like I said, with nose gear plane, I want to land on the mains first, and I'll let the nose down. So, does that sound about right, Mark? I know the guys.
I think it pretty much does. And it basically comes down a little bit what Ted was mentioning. You're going to bring your plane in flat. You're going to try to get your main gear down, but you are trying to get that a little bit of altitude or a little bit tip, and that's your elevator getting increased as you bring it in. On the tail dragger, you're just going to force the tail down, which gives you the ability to start steering. And on a triplane, it just basically you're still steering as with the rudder as you're coming in, but it gives it a chance for the nose wheel to not slam down as you hit the main gear first, and you're keeping that nose up just a little bit. And then the gear, I mean, I've seen it so much, front gear go, into a certain demise because you're coming down and you're trying to hit all three at once, like a 3-point landing. Well, the nose gear just tends to take a hard wrap, when you do that, unless you're, perfect.
Yeah.
So,
and of course we're generalizing all this because we see at our field where we're landing quite a number of planes with 0 throttle because the style of plane it is has to have the throttle cut a half a mile out just about to be able to come in and slow down enough to be able to belly land it or like the pylon racer, some of the pylon racers we have, they just don't slow down and we land them with no throttle. So this is all more the middle of the road type of planes we're talking about, not some of the extreme stuff we fly. So.
Well, when I was learning how to land too, that I was always taught to land in different directions, left and right, depending on the wind, of course. But if I notice some people like to land the same way every time, and that's not always going to happen. So when you do get comfortable, practice from every direction. Come from the left and the right, and I land a lot. I know people that watch me fly, I take off and land a lot. I love that's the best part of it. I think that that was the best information I got from Gene again. Person I learned. It's like, get comfortable and then get comfortable in every direction.
Yeah, and once controlling the throttle on landing starts to click for you, landing becomes a whole other fun thing. It's I know early on it was the stressful part, but now it's gotten more fun as the skill comes up.
That brought up one thought for me. One more thing. A lot of times I see people not hitting the runway in the dead center or, short or long. And a lot of times, I mean, I get myself in trouble too. I'll come around, I'm dropping a little faster than I expected. And I'm still waiting for the end of the runway to say, okay, I can bring it in. And the only thing I can say there is go ahead and land the plane closer to you in the middle of wherever you are in the field. There's always plenty of runway past you to land.
Yep.
I won't tell you how many times I've landed and gone, great, that was a perfect grass landing 2 feet off the runway.
Those would be 2 common mistakes I've made over the years is I go too far out and too low.
Yeah.
I overestimate the ability of some of my planes to slow down so they can come in. I don't have to go as far out and I can be higher and come in and land. And it's much easier to control where the plane lands coming in that way than coming in from far away and low.
And the field's
I found the opposite. I have to come in low to slow down enough to land.
It depends on the plane, yeah.
Yeah, my planes, if I take those bigger planes and I'm up too high, they just, they don't lose their speed coming out of the sky. So I purposely have to make another loop, come down. Okay, get low enough so I can slow it down. Well, it depends on, how you're playing.
There's always that perfect height for whatever weight plane you're flying. And I'm with you, Ted. There's times when I'm coming in too high, I know it, and I will come down and kind of flare that plane to slow it down.
Yep.
And then there'll be times I get in trouble. I come in and I'm a little low and I'll go, that's okay. The plane will carry itself. And then I find myself in trouble by landing short. Or not landing short, just coming in short.
I recommend dead sticking all the time.
Yeah.
If you got a power plane, I would dead stick it. You'll land it. You'll learn real quick.
It'll come down one way or the other.
Really,
Chris, how long is our runway?
That way.
We're just under 600 feet long.
Yeah.
The problem I have with our runway is it's compared to everywhere else I fly, it's half the width. So it took me a while to get used to, okay, where's the center of this thing? Because I don't have to worry about it in Crown Point.
Yep. Well, plus the pilot stations are a little bit closer to the actual runway compared to a lot of other places. And so you feel like the plane's coming in too close to you. So you push it out, and next thing you know, you're running out of width.
Over the grass. You know how many times I had to go around because I'm over that damn grass again.
That grass comes up too damn quick too.
Yeah, I think we can mow it further out.
Yeah.
We
Right.
we could move the flight stations further back. We'll have to talk about that. I am going to rebuild them all and lower the height of them so they're not, at the middle of your chest and more like at your waist. Because people get uncomfortable getting too close to them because they feel like they can't really see over them. So I'll lower them. But we'll chat and see if it makes more sense to move them back a little bit. I don't know. We have the room.
Yeah.
I've got a landing question. I did not try it because I didn't have time to, and I didn't feel like I knew how to yet. But the Cub that I have, you can get floats, and I'm curious if there's a difference. The way I've looked online, it seems like there's a slight different thought process about landing on water than wheels. And I've done my snow skis, and those were pretty easy. They were pretty much the same. But I'm curious if you have experience like swapping from wheels to floats, and is it the same, or is there something specifically different that you need to do?
Go, Mark.
Water is a lot harder. So
That's
water
what-
has a lot more friction.
Yep.
So what happens is you end up having to give it a lot more throttle to take off water. You
Yeah.
have to worry about where the wind is pushing you, weeds, all those kinds of things. You really want to take off into the wind. And when it breaks the friction of the water, now the plane will accelerate like crazy. So it really forces you to be smooth. And the landing's the same way. As soon as the floats touch that water, it wants to slow the plane right down. So it really makes you kind of grease your landing so that you see people that when they first start with water landings, they want to land fast. Well, as soon as the plane hits and then you get the friction of the water slowing you down, now the plane will flop over. Now you have an upside down plane in the water, which is no good. So it's very fun. These, a lot of these planes are good at it, but it's definitely harder than skis or wheels, but it's yet another technique. And they're not as aerodynamic. You have these big giant floats hanging underneath the airplane. So when you make your turns and stuff, you have to allow a little bit extra time, a little bit more speed. So if you're used to taking off the field and then you can do a sharp turn and come back on itself, with floats, they don't handle quite as good. And when you cut the throttle back, they drop much faster. You have these big non-aerodynamic styrofoam cups lugging underneath the airplane. So they don't fly quite as well, but they are super fun. I mean, Mike.
I don't know if I'll tackle that this summer, but maybe I have them in case I want to. It seems like it'd be fun to do after I get better, but I enjoyed the snow. That was fun.
What I found with floats is you have to, when you're landing, you have to keep a little more speed up. Because if sometimes if you're flying with wheels and you're coming in, you're doing the grease landing. If you slow down too much with floats, the plane will come down and hit, and then it'll jump back up and it'll hop, hop, hop. So you got to have a more momentum when you're landing, in my experience. And then the other thing is you want to keep up elevator too, because like Mark says, if you're on floats and you're turning and you have any wind, that wind will try to flip you over. So, a little bit of a no up type attitude helps. I've got it's an old SIGAT that I've got floats for. And I also built one of those flight test sea ducks, which is basically a flying boat. And the one with floats, much more challenging. Let's put it that way.
I would say the one essential thing about flying on floats is you got a way to go out there and get the plane. You either have a boat or you can swim and are not afraid of leeches. But it's going to happen. You're going to have to go get your plane. That's just the way it is.
Truer words have never been spoken. It's just a matter of time, and you're going to have to go get it. So you need an exit plan. A nice canoe is the best, but like Mike said, if you're not afraid of leeches, You're gonna have to get down in your underwear and swim. It's just the way it is.
Maybe I'll make my son do it.
I'll say the river in back of our field, the river is especially challenging when the water's high and the current. I think I've seen what seemed to me like life and limb being risked trying to get planes out.
Yes.
And really, no plane is worth it. You really got to think about that. Your plane can be replaced, but you don't. That river in back of our place, I've had a number of planes go in there, and luckily there's been branches around, or I've been able to. It's been within sight. I haven't gone in the river. I know Mark has, at least Mark has, but
Yes.
I'm not that confident in that kind of fast moving water, and it can be a strong current. So,
Yep.
yeah, we can lose a plane, but we don't want to lose a pilot.
Yep.
And it's cold.
This time of year, yes. So Mark, I believe on the water landings, you're not dropping the throttle as quick once you touch down. You've got to keep
Yes.
a little throttle to drive along the water versus on wheels, you can chop the throttle probably.
Yeah. It's just you're forced to be way smoother or you're going to flip the plane over. But once you get that technique down, it's very, very, very fun.
Yeah.
Super fun. And of course, with the electrics, a lot of the new planes have reversing ESCs. So if the water pushes your plane into the weeds, you just flip the switch, reverse ESC, and the plane pushes away from the weeds. You really kind of want to have that if you're going to do a bunch of water flying.
Yep. Anything else, gentlemen?
Yeah, on the subject of the floats, is there any body of water that is desirable, in Chittenden County where your retrieval efforts wouldn't be, too extensive?
I haven't tried Indian Brook yet, but I just got my first float plane a few weeks ago, so I might try Indian Brook and see if I get yelled at or not.
I was eyeballing at this across from the sandbar. We live right up off of the Lamoille, and we went out last summer with the kayak for the first time, and I was shocked with how shallow. I mean, I was dragging the bottom. At times it's not deep at all, but there's pretty good. It can be windy, but it seemed like if you do end up crashing a plane, you just walk out there. It's so shallow for quite a while.
You're gonna wade out there instead of swim. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. The other thing, Rick, is when our field flooded, Mark brought his plane right to the field and was flying off of half the flood. Half of us were flying where there was, land, and Mark was flying where there was water. So.
I guess you have to let Mother Nature do her thing and flood the field.
Well, it was a fun fly day, and I was trying to cancel and call it off, and I got to the top of the road, and I looked down and said, "Oh, I got to call everybody and cancel." Before I could even call and set up an email, I had 6 pickup trucks behind me ready to go down. So we said, all right, the hell with it. We went down, and we had a fun fly that day, which it turned out the guy who was supposed to bring the hamburgers didn't show, so we had to go get her burgers. But it was amazing. We had a fantastic day, even though it looked like a disaster from the beginning.
All right. I flew off the puddles. I landed on the puddles.
Yeah.
And Tony's being very quiet, but if you want help on landing, Tony is amazing. So he can take the airplane and land on the little pieces of grass that are left, because somewhere back in his early training, someone beat on him that landings are important, and he just never forgot that. So Tony might not fly much for like 2 years. He'll show up with a plane and the landing is still perfect because, like I say, someone beat that into him early on. So that's, I guess, I don't know, Tony, how do you get the landing so good?
Back in the 80s, probably a selected few right here will remember a piece of cake. It was an 049 engine mounted on a 6-foot wingspan with a tridihedral. You got 2 minutes to get it into the air and as high as you can go, and that was it. You get one chance to bring it down in front of you. That's what I grew up on. And that's why I tow gliders.
You get a plane that keeps dying on you, and you do a bunch of dead sticks.
That's right. The old glow guys. They have to be good at, because they're good at 2 things: yelling dead stick and then landing.
As Tony said, you learn dead stick really quick and got to learn how to like get that plane as close to the runway as you can, so you don't have to go walk in the corn for it. And you'd be
I think
amazed
that'll-
how well, you know, the contest where you climb and glide. Well, that's why Tony's good at it, and I think I'm pretty good at it. You're pretty good at it too, Mark. But you just learn to keep that plane in the air as long as you can. And by the way, you bring it in, and it's got to be on the field in the right place. So
And we've been talking about it all along, is know your sync of your plane. How quick does that thing
Sync
drop
rate
out
of
of the
your-
sky?
Yep,
Where
the
is
stall
their
rate, the
stall
sync rate of
point?
that plane. Yeah. Yep.
Well, Sean's another one, an old glow school guy that's being really quiet on this meeting, but you know,
His engines never quit.
with resurrecting some of the old planes that people have given them, you never know if they're going to run, how long they're going to run, is it going to stall? And, I've seen them pull off some ridiculous landings from planes that have died all over the place. So yeah, maybe everyone should start back at glow and relearn those skills.
Well, Sean has a motor cut out. He doesn't even yell dead stick. It's just a normal landing for Sean.
Hey,
Oh, he runs it till it's out of gas. Oh,
we're
all right.
converting him now. We're converting him. He's got a nice gas giant Aeromaster with a 62 Zeno on it.
Ooh.
We're going to teach him how to bring it in with the engine running.
I don't do that many dead sticks, okay?
I saw at least one
there's
last
a
year.
Milton guy. Maybe he remembers the two guys. Well, two guys came over from Milton to our club, and remember that Mark, they would run their glow right till there's no more gas, and they would always dead stick in. I was like, oh my god.
Yeah.
I can't remember the guys' names. I can't remember them, but
Ken was one of them. I don't remember the other one.
Ken, yeah. Fundus, Ken Fundus. Yeah, I think you're right.
Oh yeah.
But if the weather holds up, maybe we're only a couple weeks out. We have to see. The field itself is in great shape. There's no debris from the river. There's no holes from any animals messing it up. The field is totally flyable. It's just the road. So now this week, most of the frost worked its way up through. Most of the snow is melted. It's drying. So just as soon as we can get out there and back drag it, and we can let people know, and we can go to the field. It's probably still a little bit off, but not too far, I don't think.
Well, I've been going to the high school on Sunday because, you know, there's nothing going on there right now, athletics, and I was there last Sunday. It was in great shape, and as usual, you just park and you unload your plane, you're right there. Tree farm I thought would be open, but it's locked right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I tried looking, you know, can I go up there to the tree farm, because that's okay place to fly. The sun is in your eyes later in the afternoon. But next weekend is beginning to look like 50 degrees and like, you know, drier. And if the field isn't ready, then, you know, we can always try a little impromptu meet Sunday or Saturday or Sunday at the high school, back lot.
Yep.
I've got a different question that my son wants me to ask, and so I'll get in trouble if I don't ask. How many folks use Real Flight? We found sort of some of these multiplayer places where there are fields, and some are in invitation and some are just open, and you can just show up, and it's kind of interesting to see what's going on. I don't know if this group has ever engaged much in a online sort of field that could then be used during the winter, like next winter.
Not yet.
Not yet?
I've done it in the past with my previous club in Berlin, but we don't do it anymore. And yeah, I think they all have to be the same level of Real Flight. I'm not certain about that. Like I'm still at 6.5, and I think they're up to
9.5.
9, and so it won't work for me anymore.
Gotcha.
So is this where you actually like have photographs of your field and you put your field into the field, the Real Flight?
I haven't explored much about the customizing, but there's some, I've just looked in there on any given night. There might be 4, there might be 10, and some are like a, yeah, they have some that are like a paintball and you're shooting paintball. Some are you just flying. Some are 3D, like they're supposed, people are really actively just doing 3D flying. And so there's some loose rules around what kind of plane, but it doesn't seem like anyone cares. And it's kind of fun. And and you can also build your own. And my son was messing around with that. We're not really doing much of that. You're just sort of seeing what's out there and join up. And occasionally there's 2 or 3 people flying around. It's kind of fun, but you never know what you're going to get out there and what kind of conversations are happening. And so I wondered if there was enough people that would create one that was a safe spot where you could go.
You can set up your own group that's not open to everybody, and that's what we used to do. We didn't do the public group. It's just like this, only you're on the simulator, you're flying, and all of a sudden there's other planes around.
Right.
You can talk, you're talking to each other, so you can hear each other talk.
Yeah, it's
and
pretty neat.
then you just fly. It's kind of fun.
Yeah. Well, it might be something to explore later if people have it, but
Well, usually, so you didn't get to experience it this year, but we have a bunch of indoor flying events, so where we're flying indoor type planes. And so save some budget for next winter for yourself.
I gotta buy another plane.
Another plane, yeah. You're in this hobby. You can be buying planes all the time.
You know what they say, guys over 50 shouldn't fly RC airplanes. Really, 50 is enough, right?
Yeah. I think I reached that limit or that's the amount. Yeah.
Yeah.
I got a question on wind and when you're planning ahead, thinking about flying on any given day or days ahead, what are you using for reference? What are your criteria to get you, in a position where you think you're probably going to go flying? You probably have limits on flying day and as you plan. What are your thoughts there?
Go ahead, Al. You start.
Well, my criteria are 10 miles an hour and less is a very fun day. 15 miles an hour is my trainer limit. I will not put a trainer in the air trying to teach somebody how to fly when it's 15 miles an hour or higher. And myself personally, if I'm desperate, I'll be out there in 20 mile an hour winds. I know that Mark and I, when we did the Maritime Festival, went out when it was gusting to 30 and we flew. And we're landing on a little triangle patch, out there on the waterfront and flying over water. So, it all depends on your expertise. It depends on how comfortable you are flying. That said, I took my foaming out because I was so desperate because I haven't been doing any indoor flying, and I put it out in my front yard with a 10 or 15 mile an hour wind, and I immediately regretted ever putting it in the air. And got it back in one piece, but I was like, oh my God, the neighbor's gonna own my plane. It's gonna be on his roof. Gosh, so
I think you should force yourself to fly in the wind. I was always afraid of flying when it was too windy, and I didn't fly enough. So I have what I call a wind plane that I don't care about. It's a real beater, and it can be blowing at 20 miles an hour, and I'll put it up. And I've never crashed it. I've had a blast with it. And because I don't care about it, nothing happens to it. So force yourself to fly in the wind more, don't start with 30 miles an hour, but force yourself to fly in the wind. And number one, you'll be a much better pilot. Everything else will seem easy after that. That's my recommendation.
I want to put in a plug for our competition night then, because that's the rule of competition night is we fly. Unless there's lightning, we fly. And not only are you flying, but you're trying to do something while you're flying. And you cannot lose in any way because you are going to become a better pilot or a better builder, one or the other.
Better repairer.
One or the other.
The higher the wind, the heavier the plane does better. So even taking a plane that normally flies 1800 battery and just putting a 2600 in it, so it's a little heavier, but still has good CG, helps that plane fly better in the wind.
Yeah, that's true. The wind, the plane I call my wind plane is very heavy. It's a biplane, really heavy, but it's a blast to fly in the wind.
And if you have anything like AS3X or any kind of stabilization gyro, where some of us are running the Flex Innovation products now, those obviously make flying in the wind much easier because you can't respond quick enough. You don't even know the plane's getting blown, and the gyros sense that way before you saw it and already corrected for it. So, so that's sometimes like in the recent couple of years with a bunch of us have these planes called QQs. You've seen it out there probably last year. And we'll say, oh, let's go fly anyway. We'll just bring the QQs and something else. And we know we can fly in the wind with the QQ because it's got stabilization. Yep.
So Rick, what kind of plane do you have right now?
I've got the Mini Apprentice,
Okay, yep.
which is about a foot less wingspan than the Apprentice, and
Yep.
a Turbo Timber, the 1.5 meter, and then recently got the UMX, the little guy Turbo Timber, which is a lot of fun, and that might be my wind plane to play around with because it's so light, but everybody, all the reviews on it are, you got to get it up in the wind because you can fly it like a kite. So that might be my go-to wind plane to play around with. But I've wondered what everybody's criteria was when they look at the weather or the hour by hour wind forecast and what your guidelines are as far as going, but you've given me a lot of insight.
Yeah, it depends. The key thing for me is wind direction. Here, I'll just
That
we're
helps
talking
too.
about it. So I
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I tend to just, what I found is pretty accurate for our field is just a Google quick check like this. And when you look at wind right here, you're getting wind speed and direction. And so know that our field is roughly north-south.
Yeah.
So right now, 5 miles an hour is a crosswind right now. But later on, it switches to out of the north, and that's right down the runway. So this is helpful. Are you familiar with the site windy.com, I think is what it's called?
Yeah, I have that app.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That helps too to get an idea of not just magnitude of the wind, but the direction. Because, even 5 miles an hour crosswind is much more difficult than 10 down the runway.
And that I use that WCAX weather app that gives you the hourly wind direction and strength. So you can kind of have an idea on the day, the next 2 days, what the wind's going to be under 10 or over 10 and so forth.
Yeah.
It's kind of a good tool to use, but I was just, obviously where I am, I'm calmer the better, but I'm thinking from what I'm hearing, you need to get out there in the wind and just have fun.
And what we're pretty sure what a couple of us are finding is when this says a certain mile per hour, the south direction tends to be less at our field than what it reports. Because it's doing a general for the area. So we're a little sheltered from the south, but we're much more exposed from the north.
You're talking about the contest in wind. One of the things we were doing in Berlin a few years ago, we had a nice steady 20-mile-an-hour wind. And it was, down a runway. So we weren't worried about crosswinds. So our goal was to fly backwards.
Yeah.
Bring it into a hover and see if you could go backwards. And we achieved it a couple of times. So that would be a great contest night.
That's a good one, yeah.
I got to start practicing backwards.
Yeah.
Yes.
Does anybody use the handheld anemometers at the field to measure wind speed? There you go.
I just go like
that.
So what's true about a handheld anemometer or just whatever's happening at ground level, it's different 20 feet up.
Yeah, that's true.
The air is always moving. It can feel really calm, and if you've flown at all, it feels calm. You take off, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, there's wind up here.
Yep.
There's a huge difference between my house at Colchester and getting to the field.
Yeah.
Calm at home and blowing like crazy up at the field, or vice versa. Seems really windy in Colchester, and I'll go to the field and be like, it's nice.
Yeah, your best bet is just go to the field.
I'm 55 minutes away, so it's always different for me.
Yeah.
I have Chris was helping me this week set up a motor glider that's I'm looking forward to flying. And I don't know who has experience with those, but I'm hoping that it would be better in windy conditions than the Carbon Cub. I don't know if it's going to make much of a difference or not. It's a little bigger.
It has AS3X, so that'll help it a lot.
Yeah. I don't know if that's a correct assumption to make or not, but I'm going to find out.
Yep.
So Chris, I think that'd make a good subject. The AS3Xs and the other stabilizers. How to program? I put one in a plane last year just to play with it, but I don't really know how to use it yet. I hope to learn more about that this year. So if you ever want another topic, how to program AS3X for doing various different things, it'd be good to know.
Okay. Yeah, there's quite a range of stuff because like the AS3X is built into the receiver versus some of the other stuff
Exactly.
that you buy is separate from, it's a separate, not a receiver. And then the one I was talking about, the Flex Innovations, it becomes the receiver. It can be either or. So yeah, there's quite a range of
Do you like the Flex Innovation?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Easy to program?
Yes, I think so. I mean, it's like anything. It's got, enough screens where you can get confused, but once you practice it a little bit, it's pretty good.
Okay, the one I tried was built into the receiver. It was one of the big 20 channels spectrums I put on my 40% plane, but I want to add that to some of my smaller planes. So I think maybe I'll try the Flex Innovation.
Well, the radio built ones are good too. So, it just depends.
Well, Spectrum has quite a few receivers now with it built in.
I
And
know.
it's way simpler because now with the two-way communication, you can do it from your radio. You're only worried about mounting one thing in your plane stable, not two things. You're not worried about different software for one to talk to the other. So like Chris said, it's simple once you figure it out. It's another piece of hardware. It's another set of software. It's a whole bunch. Basically, all of them do the same thing. It's just what they call it and how to get to that menu.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. When I first put this in my plane, I got it all set up. I followed the screen, and I was using, the transmitter because it was built in, but it wouldn't work because one little thing it didn't say in the directions was it won't engage until you move the throttle all the way up.
25%.
Yeah. AS3X.
Well, I wasn't doing that. I'm like, what the hell? It took me a month to figure that out.
That's what Alan and I ran into the other night. I haven't played with one since last year, and we had everything going. And he's like, no, it's not. The servos aren't moving. I was like, oh yeah, you gotta bump it once. Yeah. Yep. Cool. Well, I don't know if we'll do a Zoom on gyro stuff. So I'll maybe shoot an email out, see if there's enough people interested in it. But
No,
we can certainly
we do it next winter.
we can certainly do some one-on-one if needed to cover it. So yeah.
Thanks for the time. I'm gonna run.
Okay.
Look forward to
Anybody
seeing you
else
all.
have questions? Yeah, Alan.
Thanks,
Anyone
Chris.
else have stuff they want to talk about before we're done?
Well, I was just wondering has anybody had any experience with these Dyna thrust props? You gasser guys?
Is that
No?
for a real airplane? That thing's huge.
Yeah, it's quite a club, but it's for my G62. But I have like 6 of these things, and I haven't read one good thing about them.
Oh,
Is that nylon, Sean, or is it carbon fiber? Or
I think it's made out of lead. It weighs. But it's pretty big. I remember running one of these on my Texan, my big Texan that had the auto starter, the auto start inside of it. And they wanted me to run these because they were heavier.
Huh.
And it actually stopped kickback.
Yeah.
But
okay, yeah.
I've had them, other than them being very heavy, it's plastic.
Well, I've used them on several planes, and you got to think of it as a flywheel. So it really limits your response time on the motor.
Excel
So
and
you
decel.
want to crank it up. So on I assume you're talking about the G62 for that?
For this one, yeah,
Yeah. What size is that one? Is that 22?
2210.
That's a really heavy prop for the G62. Best thing to do is I use the wooden props, a 2210 on the G62. That's wood, much lighter, and it'll make your response time much quicker. If you put that on, it'll be smooth, but your response time is going to be really low in terms of the throttle variation.
Plus
Yeah, I
your
was
gas
going to use
already
them
has it.
I was going to use them as a fallback more than anything, or just to use the things.
It'll work. It'll work. Try it. But just try it to see. It won't hurt it. It's just a different response.
So you haven't heard any failure stories or anything like that on them?
No.
I don't know how they could. I think you could hit a car with this.
In fact, I use those on my PT-19, which has a little Zenoa 23, and I do it on purpose for that one. But I tried it on a little 20cc motor on another plane, and boy, I didn't like it at all. I had to switch to a much lighter prop so I could get some response out of the motor.
So it sounds good to use if I have to.
Zenoa's big enough motor. It's not going to be a problem. I think you should do it just to see the difference. Bigger wood prop out and put, get used to flying the plane first.
Yeah.
Put that on and try it, and you'll see the difference. You'll feel the difference.
Are there any penalties when you're flying that one, if you do a quick throttle up, can it actually cause a problem, or does it just take longer to spin up?
Just take longer to spin up. It's not going to hurt it.
Gotcha. Doesn't flood it out or anything like that.
No.
Cool.
I think I had one on a G26, and that's the biggest thing I noticed with it is just throttle response. It turned a pretty snappy little motor into not such a snappy little motor. It definitely slowed it down, but
depends on what you want to do with it. The motor also won't stall either. It's got a big flight ring on it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. Yeah. Good stuff. Anyone have anything else?
Nope. See you at the field, guys.
Cool.
Can't wait to fly. See ya.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Bye now.
Bye.
Guys.
Thanks, guys.